Now, it's midwinter in the Northern Hemisphere, so Father Christmas and his elves are extremely busy providing services for us. But who provides services like water and sanitation for them? Well, we're going to come to that in our And Finally story, but our next guest is a polar scientist, Don Cowan. He's a professor at the University of Pretoria, South Africa, and has been working in the Antarctic for the past 25 years. Now, earlier this month, Joe Burgess spoke with Don about the challenges and opportunities that come from working in a polar climate.
For the folks that don't know you out there, who's Don Cowan and what takes him to polar regions?
Well, Don Cowan is a scientist. It's been all his life. But as somebody very politely put, I went to the university at the age of 18 and never left. I got to go to Antarctica first as a student, as a pack horse field assistant, back in 1977. And decided then that it was such a wonderful, magnificent, awe-inspiring place that I had to get back there someday. And I eventually did. 20 years later or thereabouts, I got the opportunity to return as a scientist and to start asking the sort of questions that scientists like to ask. And we didn't just go to Antarctica, we went to the dry valleys of Antarctica, which are very special. Dry valleys are, they're deserts. They're cold deserts, very cold deserts, but they're genuine deserts. So although there's a lot of water there, it's all frozen. And that's been my focus for the last 25 years, the microbiology of this very extreme cold desert.
And when you're a scientist in the Antarctic dry valleys, what's your working day look like? Are you based in buildings? Is there a research base? Are you camping? What do your working conditions look like?
I work with the Americans and the New Zealanders, and their particular model is very much a field camp model. So you do a few days training in the nearest base, which is about an hour's flight away, out on Ross Island, and then you get dumped with you and your colleagues, and your ton of gear gets dumped on the sand somewhere in the dry valleys, and they fly away and leave you to it. You set everything up, you set up your tents, depending on how sophisticated you are, how long you're going to be there. You set up your kitchen, you set up your toilet facilities, and then you live there. Antarctica is a difficult place to do experimental work. And so the microbiologists like myself, we tend to focus very much on collecting samples that are going to go back to the laboratories for much more detailed work there, things you can't do out in the field. Okay. And so basically a day is very often shouldering a not too heavy pack, climbing the nearest mountain or walking up the nearest valley and returning after a reasonable breakfast 8 to 10 to 12 hours later with a much heavier pack filled with bags of sand.
When you mentioned setting up camp, you talked about setting up the toilets, and that's one half of the water cycle that I'm particularly interested in. What do your toilets look like? And if you're working in a desert and you're pack horsing everything in, does that mean you have to take water with you?
So in the Antarctic, no, we don't take water in because there's always a source of water somewhere. You can chip ice off a glacial front. You can dig snow out of a snowpack if there's one handy. But a lot of the valleys have intermittent stream flows in summer. Remember, we only work down there in summer. Okay. So the glacial melt produces ephemeral streams. They're normally frozen first thing in the morning. You've got to wait for them to thaw out. And then you can get sometimes slightly salty, generally slightly gravelly water. So water supply isn't a problem. But
water treatment?
Water treatment is completely unnecessary. Okay. This is clean, pure water. If it's come from a glacier, it's 100,000 years old, and it's absolutely clean. So no water treatment required, which is remarkable. It's one of the few places in the world where you probably don't need to do that.
But once you've drunk it, I mean, as soon as you give people drinking water, the first thing they do with it is make wastewater. What do you do with water when you've finished with it?
So this is all bound up with the conservation and environmental protection protocols that override everything when you're working in Antarctica. Remember, Antarctica is so-called the last pristine continent, the one that hasn't been messed up by human activity. And although it's maybe hard to find a place where a human boot has never stood, it's still entirely possible. But the concept, as originally established in the treaty, a continent for peace and science, I think they said, was that scientists work there should leave it in a form that is essentially unmodified so the next generation or the one after that, or the one after that, can essentially continue that work without an anthropogenic influence of any sort.
Beautiful.
The implication for this then is that all waste, liquid, solid, human, grey water, and any other cooking material, is bagged and shipped out. Reason that one therefore limits water use as much as possible. So you don't really wash when you're down there. You occasionally, about once every 2 weeks, I have a full bath in 500 mils of water. The reason, of course, is that every litre of water that you take from a stream or a glacial mass, melt, drink, or put in your food, ends up in a container that has to be shipped out by helicopter. And
Right.
so the helicopters bring in 1,600 pounds, they work in American pounds, 1,600 pounds of gear. They want to return everybody to base with 1,600 pounds plus or minus. They don't want 2,600 because you've got 10 enormous barrels of water because everybody had a shower.
Grey water and wastewater, of course, yeah.
Exactly.
So are the
So-
toilet bags, or what do the toilets look like?
It depends on the camp you're in.
Okay.
If you're in a large American, a well-funded American camp, you've probably got a chemical toilet in a nice blue plastic box or something. In a very simple Kiwi camp, you have a bucket, orange plastic bucket, supermarket type bucket, 25 litre,
Okay.
with a wooden toilet seat sitting on top of it, and a blue bag inside of it. And the blue bags are very important. And a white plastic 20-litre barrel with a wide mouth funnel. Solid waste
Oh,
and liquid
solid-
waste in that double sealed and shipped out in the rear cargo hold of the helicopter.
Glad to hear it. Where do they go once they're shipped? Do they get delivered to the local sewage treatment works? Do you know what happens to them once they've left Antarctica?
As I understand it, liquid waste can be disposed of in the sea.
Interesting. Okay.
And solid waste is, as I understand it, put onto the first cargo ship that comes down to the Ross Sea area and is shipped back to New Zealand for secure incineration. So, so this is part of the conservation imperative, which is zero impact.
Zero impact, of course.
Particularly zero waste impact, zero chemical impact on any environment you work in. You wouldn't dream of pouring the dregs of your coffee cup out on the sand. It's just would never be done, or it should never be done, because that would contaminate a piece of sand with some foreign material that's going to be there in 100 years' time. So very careful protection of liquids and solids. And what I always found really quite inspiring was at least the teams I worked with buy into this concept absolutely and totally.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Joe. That was absolutely fascinating. Now, anybody who's an overlander or backwoods camper will know that's something we should all be doing whenever we go into anywhere rural, any national park, no matter where we are, even if they're not the pristine, dry valleys of Antarctica.